Welcome to the Alternative Dog Moms Podcast. I'm Kimberly Gauthier, creator of Keep the Tail Wagging. I've been blogging about raw feeding, pet wellness, and life as a crazy dog mom for more than 10 years. I've seen massive improvements in my dog's health since I began raising my dogs naturally, and I'm passionate about sharing my experience to help other pet parents.
I'm Erin Scott from the Believe in Dog podcast. For more than 10 years, I've been researching and learning everything I can about healing cancer, allergies, autoimmune, and mystery illnesses in both my dogs and myself. And I can't wait to share with you everything I've learned in case it could help you too. As the Alternative Dog Moms, Kimberly and I are bringing you all the latest dog health news that we're following and the brilliant people we're meeting along the way. Now let's get started. Hello, Kimberly.
Hello, Erin. Happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary. Yes, it's 3 years since we launched the podcast, and we're here with one of our favorite guests to celebrate. Billy, how are you?
I am very good. Thank you so much for having me. I can't believe it's been 3 years. It's like time flies, I guess.
In this post-COVID world, like, what is time anymore?
I know. Yeah, it does. I don't know when things happen, how things happen, where things happen. Everything is either pre-2020 or post-2020 for me.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, it's wild. My daughter turns 4 on May 1st. So
That's what cracks me up. Oh, it's so funny. She turns 4. I turned 54 on May 2nd. So I'm 50 years older than your daughter. Oh, yay. But it cracks me up because whenever I see pictures or videos of her, I'm just like, she's a whole person.
Yeah.
She's very opinionated these days. And I was actually talking to my niece over the weekend who's about to be 21. And I was like, oh, when Maple's your age, you'll be my age. And when you're my age, I'll be, let's not talk about that. Go into that. So
yeah, my nephew just got his driver's license this week, and that's been messing with my head a little bit.
100%.
So, Billy, you've been busy?
Yes. Yeah, we've been we it's a joke in the company that we always say like, oh, we're gonna take time to focus on our existing products and, get the education out there and sell these things. And then new ideas come up and Kelly and I just kind of run with it. And then we have new products. I think we gauge that not necessarily by I think companies generally go like, oh, they look at it like the business side of like, oh, we need to do this many a year or we need to do, and then they just fill that in with something. But we don't really operate like that. We operate on it has to be a really good idea that we want to do. And if that's the case, then it might be 3 things in a spring, or it might be 0 things. It just depends on like what will actually drive the industry and nutrition and be able to kind of push for better health outcomes.
It seems like your company has kind of not really even shifted, because I think it's been this way since Kelly came out with her very first product, is very focused in building a stronger gut health with the dogs, because it's like with Green Juju with Bailey's blend. And I guess, the original Green Juju, that was ultimately feeding the gut microbiome. And then everything since then you guys have done has basically gone to that place. I mean, other places as well, but it looks like you guys work from the belief that the gut is the foundation of health. And then you're building and strengthening that as well as adding other things.
Yeah, I think it started with this idea of, I think we have to kind of put that into 2 different sections. And one of them is the probiotic bacteria and yeast and things. And then the other one is feeding them. And feeding them is just as important. We know that in measuring microbiomes, you can actually get better, healthier results. Even you don't even add any probiotic bacteria, you just add more fiber. And so we know that becomes really important. And that was really the basis, foundation of the company from when Kelly started. And now it's kind of cool because we can take that as like a starting point and we can add other kind of probiotic foods and the new supplements and things like that.
So I'm excited to try the Vitality Blend. Is that going to be available in the stores soon?
It's available now. It's depending on, it's always at the beginning, it's depending on where you are. because of the fact that it gets shipped from the distributor to the stores. And so it just depends on like when their order comes in and that kind of stuff. Like I was coming back from a family vacation yesterday, and I stopped in at Pug and Hound in Illinois there, and they had a bunch of Vitality Blend, etc. So I think I'm gonna get my first order of it. I mean, I've used it before, but I mean, this is what always happens to me. I always get to like either make or like use the product before people, and then I don't have it anymore, and then other people get it before me. Because then I'm dependent on when it comes into my local store. So I'm getting my first order of the Vitality Blend on Friday, I think.
Oh, good. Maybe it'll be available down here soon.
Yeah,
It
I
should. If
know.
it's available to me, it should be available to you.
Yeah, I should go and look in my Jewels and see if she has it. When I was there earlier this month, I didn't see it.
She probably does now, I'm
Yeah.
guessing. But
Yeah,
don't
that'll
quote
be
me
cool.
on that. Don't call me out if she doesn't.
I will be calling you out. I will take a picture of her freezer and then I will tag you and
I
call you a
don't.
liar.
I don't doubt that.
And I was excited about seeing all the blends be in a freeze-dried format too. And I haven't tried a lot of them yet, but I want to.
Yeah, freeze drying is a really cool way. I mean, I think it gets kind of a bad rap in the like hardcore raw feeder, circles, because it's a processing step. But I feed the freeze dried food to Huckleberry. Why? Because I know it retains 97% of the nutrients, and I know that he likes it more. And he's a small guy; he's 28 pounds, and so it's not a crazy amount of freeze dried food, but he just visibly loves it more. And so I think that means something. And so if you look at studies with like fruit, different berries, and look at freeze drying versus conventional freezing, there are studies that show that freeze dried berries and such retain more nutrients than conventionally frozen foods, and or if you pick something and then wait a couple days. And I think that's really, you can see that, and this is like maybe somewhat unscientific, but I feel like you can see it with your own eyes because when you look at our blends, there's always going to be, like, if you look at the golden blend, the top of that's funny. There's like, my dog is over there and there's like people surrounding him at the co-working space and petting him. He lives a good life. Um, but if you look at like the golden blend, you're gonna have like a greenish layer on top, and then you're gonna scoop into it and it's gonna be like
Yeah.
vibrant gold
Hmm.
color. And so that's just oxidizing. And so when you look at the freeze dried blends, they are just straight up that color, right? Like, and so I think that can show you that, oh, there is some really good preservation happening here.
Do you guys plan on, or do you currently sell those in more bulk packaging?
We don't. We do just the 5.5 ounce and the 1.75 ounce. So the 5.5 ounce is the equivalent of three 15-ounce containers when
Mhm.
it's rehydrated, and it's like the same price when you factor in the rehydration part of it.
Yeah. Nice.
And each one of those contains like a different herb or nutrient substance that we put in those only, mainly because we want to put those things in, and also it's a weird regulatory thing with freeze dried versus frozen versus food or supplement. As you know, AAFCO is fun and exciting to work around and work through. So
I have a question for you just randomly. I noticed recently that I've seen more instances of the Department of Agriculture, specifically in Oregon, going after brands versus the FDA. And someone told me that the FDA no longer regulates raw food brands. And I'm convinced that
that
I
is
misunderstood that.
no, that's just completely untrue.
Okay.
Um, FDA oversees all pet food. Uh, and if the PER Act passes, then none of the labeling or anything like that, states will be forbidden from really doing anything. And so like we will just send our labels to the FDA to one place versus right now it's all the places. So they right now they sort of like The FDA is technically in charge, but the states are using AAFCO to adopt their own state laws.
Hmm.
So that's why it's like a state by state basis, and that's why you can use AAFCO or not use AAFCO. Most of them use AAFCO, et cetera. But if the PRAC passes, then that actually legislates that they can't anymore, and that's where AAFCO then wouldn't be a thing.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
which is where I think it's going because, you know, the FDA did not renew the memorandum of understanding. So that's for the first time in like 100 years. So,
Talking about requirements, and there's a big discussion going on in the raw feeding community right now about people requesting a complete nutritional analysis from the brands that they buy food from. And it's actually been a really interesting discussion because I can see why people would do this. I can understand why brands would give a little pushback. I can see it from all aspects, and I think everyone has an excellent point. And I was wondering, what are your thoughts on providing a complete nutritional analysis?
so we do that at
Mhm.
Green Juju. So anytime someone emails us and asks, so I think the first point that people talk about is should it be on your website or not? Should you have to ask for it? And I understand when people say um, it should just be straight on the website, but I will give you another perspective on that. We did that once, and I find that people reaching out and asking you for it actually weeds out people and just gets you the people that actually want to know that information
Mhm.
versus and I know this from experience over the last 12 years. If it is on your website, you get a ton of people who just want to argue with you about your food. And that's we put it up for a while and we saw that immediately. I don't like this about it, et cetera, et cetera. So what we're trying to do is not get bogged down in that, because what can happen there is, someone might say, I don't like this about it. This is what's happening. And then I might go back and forth a couple times with that person. They don't like my response and they're posting it somewhere and they're doing this. And those are all uncontrollable variables. So
Yeah.
what we're trying to do is get to the brass tacks of who's interested in feeding our food and who's interested in this. And so I think the best solution to that is to have all that information available. And I'm willing to go really deep with someone if they're wanting to know, particular information about what we're doing. And be happy to have that over email. I'll even sometimes, there was someone who was wondering recently about calorie deficits and some things like that. And I was honestly like, this is going to be easier to explain to you over the phone. So my number is in the signature. If you want to give me a call, I think this will be, so we don't have to go back and forth like 9 times. So that to me is the best middle point between those, coming from the manufacturer's side of it, to be as transparent as possible. And I don't think anyone is more transparent than us. So, it's like to be as transparent, but also avoid, the trolls, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, I reached out to several brands, only basically the brands that I didn't even bother reaching out to you because somehow I just figured you guys had that information somewhere. But I reached out to several other brands and I tried to be as just random as possible. So ones that maybe wouldn't provide that information. And each and every one, once they understood why I wanted it, because that was like their big thing was like, well, why do you want it? Are you taking it to post it someplace? Are you, like what do you need to know? And once I was able to articulate that I just basically wanted to know if it was something that they did. I got they emailed it to me with no issues.
Yeah.
And so I was really impressed by the number of people who do go and have that done. I was also shocked by the cost. I mean, it's also very, varying as far as the cost of getting it done. I was really surprised by that and very grateful that I don't own a raw food company because I didn't even know that. I don't know what I thought you guys do as far as when you're formulating food. It's not something I've ever put a lot of thought into.
Mhm. Well, there's a couple things on that. We really have three methods by which we can, it's funny because I've been working on some stuff recently, and you can see the flaws in these methods in the two methods that people talk about a lot within just looking at, say, the last, you know 2 or 3 years of, let's say, testing certain nutrients for our food, right? So you can take, so we do formulation software, right? We also do comparing that to various data points of actual testing. And then we did a feeding trial in last year as well, which essentially is regulate from a regulatory perspective covers our foods because they're all formulated very similarly. That was on our beef in case anyone's, wanting to do that specifically. And so we're trying to do that from three different perspectives. And here's the reason why. You can take a look at our beef and you can test it for a specific nutrient 3 times and it'll be wildly different. Same formula, wildly different. So that's where you actually use formulation software to even some of those things out. What can we expect at some point? Because it just really depends on what you might get in. You might get like, I'll just think of a particular nutrient. You might get your calcium. You might get it in range in 2 of those, and the other one might have no calcium. Obviously, the food has calcium, but in that sample, there was no bone. Just happened to
Mm.
be in that mixed up part of the sample, there's no bone. So if we were to do one test and do that, would it be like there's no calcium in this food? So that's there's a huge margin of error for those tests. But even when you do them, I'm talking about like a nutrient might be at like 7.9 and then go up to 20 on the next one. Same formula, same food. And so we use 3 of them. And I actually think formulation software can be even more valuable, to be honest. I think it's the most valuable to compare those things against each other as best you can, as well as do a feeding trial, which obviously we thought the feeding trial was really important because that costs a lot of money. I think it's important to mention that those dogs that were not beagles in a lab, that they were loved dogs in the suburbs of Chicago and all different sizes and activity levels. So I think for people to be like, it's you can get an idea of what's going to be in the food using those things. It's good to test. It's good to use the formulation software, and that's why I'm trying to look at this from a realistic standpoint of what's
Hmm.
actually true, and not a sort of like dream world where we can test food and we know that's exactly what's in it,
Yeah.
especially when you're using actual food.
Yeah.
That's where you get the variance. If you make a pretty base food and throw a supplement synthetic vitamin pack in it, you'll probably get more consistent results, but you're not going to get better health.
Yeah.
That's the whole point of what we're doing, I would hope.
If you were a pet parent who did not work for a raw food company, would you be somebody who was asking for this kind of information for your dog?
Yeah, for sure. And I have been that person and I have definitely asked, but I also am someone who believes in that we've sort of met it. We sort of have conventionalized holistic feeding. Used to be like, how do we get as many fresh foods into the pet's diet as possible? And now it's kind of about like, well, we need to make sure we hit this nutrient profile. We need to hit this vitamin and mineral requirement, even though a lot of those vitamin mineral requirements are based on, um, this say the synthetic version of a vitamin, say in the form of copper versus like food, right? And so I like it just because it's fun for me and because it's interesting, but I don't bank on that. Like, here's a good example. Lately, I've been feeding Huckleberry about 50%, and this is just the base of his calories. Obviously, on top of this, there's the blends, etc. I've been feeding about 50% of his calories in our freeze-dried food, and then the other 50% of his calories is an egg, and then I make up the rest of the calories in milk because I consider those to be as complete as the food, even though milk's a great example of that. We know that animals can just subside off it. We've seen it. We know it doesn't hit any nutrient profile. Doesn't hit AAFCO, doesn't hit NRC, doesn't hit any of these things. So there's just I think we're taking I would just rather see people if they're gonna start adding these things, I'd rather start seeing them adding them rather than like go somewhere in a group and then you're like, I added an egg. And they're like, well, actually, if you add an egg, you should be adding this to balance this. And this should be, just let them add the egg and be okay with it.
Is that the voice you hear when you're reading
Yeah.
comments? Because if that's the case, I want you to read comments for me all the time.
That's my nerd voice, which is kind of my normal voice anyway. So we're both nasally, so I do what I do.
So as a pet parent coming from the consumer end, do you think that we need to be reaching out to like like I rotate between like 3 or 4 different brands, like should we be reaching out to every company about this? Or I guess like for me, I've kind of just put a level of trust in the system, like
Mhm.
and also, I don't know that I 100% would know what to do with this information if I had it. And so I guess I've always looked at it from like a rotational perspective of like if I hit a couple different brands, then, I'm going to hopefully make up any gaps or even anything out, kind of approach rather than, I'm just not going to sit down with a spreadsheet. I'm just not.
Yeah. No, totally. No, I think that if you feel like you need to, reaching out is fine. But also, like, I remember I was talking to someone about, they were wondering about like our diet in relation to, is there going to be a deficiency if you're feeding less, et cetera. So we were going over that and I was saying no. But then I just at the end of the email strain, I was like, hey, just out of curiosity, like besides our food, what else do you feed? And I mean, it was like our blends, sardines. It was like this whole list. I'm like, of course you're not going to have any nutritional deficiencies. Like you just named 10 other things that you feed on a consistent basis besides our food. And so uh the only way it would become, I guess, maybe more relevant is if you were like, I'm only feeding this food. Because even treats factor in, everything factors. And so maybe it'd be more relevant if you were doing like a traditional like kibble style feeding where you're like, this is the only thing that my dog will eat for the rest of its life, then yeah, that might be more relevant. But not, I don't think it's relevant to if you're in an internet Facebook raw feeding group and you have gone to that extent and this is what you do, you're not gonna have a deficiency from well formulated commercial diet.
That's how I feel about it.
When I was looking into it, as I've been diving deep for a few days now, and I thought that people who have dogs that have copper storage issues and they needed to know how much copper was in the food, people who had just any
Kidney
type of
issues.
yeah, just basically a dog with health issues, and they just wanted to be sure. And I just find it interesting because, going through and reading the comments and stuff and seeing someone like, if you're that concerned, then just make it yourself. And it's like, yeah, not everyone could do that either. So some people really have to depend on a company. And then there's, my main example that popped in my head when this first started was a friend of mine. She was feeding her dog a brand, and it was a local brand to her. So just basically one of those mom and pop type companies. And she had a dog that was allergic to chicken. And I can't remember if it was her dog or her grand dog type of thing. But the dog was allergic to chicken. And suddenly, out of nowhere, the dog started showing all the signs that he had when he ate anything with chicken in it. And she never fed chicken. So she started becoming suspicious and had the food tested and learned that this person was basically had all of these proteins, but most of them were chicken. And he
No,
was just
that's
labeling them as different things. And so, I mean, granted, if you ask a person like that for their complete nutritional analysis, I'm sure they're just going to doctor up something and give it to you, because it's like if they're lying about the proteins, they're going to lie about everything else.
yeah.
But that was just sort of like there are, I don't think it's common, but there are nefarious brands out there that, maybe they didn't start out bending the rules, but, they definitely are now. But I just don't think that's common. And then on the flip side, I had a conversation with someone this morning about how brands can afford to pay influencers $15,000 to promote their food. And I was just like, I'm sorry, what? And it's like, who's paying
Like, how do I
$15,000?
get in on that? I agree.
I mean,
We
it's
do
like,
not have the money to do that. So
yeah, that's what I was just like, I don't know any brand that has that money. And they named a few brands, but they were brands that I wouldn't really consider raw. I mean, they're, raw brands, and I'm using air
Hmm.
quotes, in that they call themselves raw or they're freeze dried. But, like one in particular has peanut butter as one of their ingredients. Yeah.
Very,
And and they
never heard of
are
that.
backed by venture capitalists. So they have tens of millions of dollars backing them. So of course they can afford to do all the ads and the influencer
Yeah.
marketing and things
Yeah,
like that.
we have no backing. We have Green Juju and we are self-funded. So I trust is a huge element of it for what you just said. And that's one of the reasons why when we make new products, Kelly and I do Facebook Lives and we say, this is us. This is who we're people. We care about your animals and here's why we made this product. And I think that's important. I don't really see a lot of that
Mhm.
out there, especially when you're doing things that are new and different, you know, be it the food or the probiotics or whatever.
Yes, congratulations on your new probiotics line. We're very excited about that.
That also isn't in the store yet.
No, that'll be in April. I I actually just finished one of them today. So just really excited about that. It's a funny one because it's really hard to describe to people what it is because it's such a new concept. We took, raw fermented milk, we took kombucha and we took Bailey's blend and we fermented, those are all three fermented foods. We wild fermented Bailey's blend and we essentially took the whole culture. So everyone else makes when people have made supplements in the past, probiotic supplements, they isolate specific cultures. So you can go to a lab and you can say, we want to make a supplement. What cultures do you have? And they can give you a list and then you can kind of make up whatever you want. But we think there's a lot of value in food and returning animals to the microbiome state of dirt and the world around them and healthy yeast and all these different things. And so we took the entire culture itself and had a lab grow out that entire culture, which will have, like, if you're talking about soil or leaf, hundreds of different probiotic strains and healthy yeast in the case of leaf, or thousands when it comes to farm. And we had them grow those cultures in a different medium. So what you're left with is the probiotics from those foods without any of the food left. So it's not like we just freeze dried raw fermented milk or something like that. We created sort of I would say like a new category in that sense, and it's really cool because number one, it's like concentrating nature. So if you take leaf for example, um, leaf is
Do you mean
made
like, are you
from
saying leaf like from trees?
leaf, yeah, because
That's the
it's
name of their product.
yeah, because it's like tea, like kombucha is made of green
Okay.
tea. And it is my SCOBY that's been going for like over 10 years and has all these. It's a very complicated culture. It's got a lot of different things in it. So that one little half-gram scoop is going to have the same probiotic content as a gallon and a half of kombucha. So it's
Oh,
like
wow.
concentrating nature, but also, and the other part that I realized when I'm doing tour dates with Rita Hogan this year, and I've learned so much from her. And uh, when when I was telling her about the new products, she got really excited. And one of the things that I was like, oh, this is going to be perfect for you because now there are animals that don't do well with fermentation, right? Be it from a chemical standpoint or a energy standpoint, right? Like it's a warming process, etc. There are animals who don't do well with dairy. Now, none of that matters with these products. You can get the probiotic benefit. So, like, if you have a dog who is cool, who needs cool foods, and goat milk is warming, right? Now it doesn't matter because it's just the bacteria. There's no constituents left of the food.
Hmm.
And then the other thing too is we like to, we're trying to reach as many people as possible and make as many dogs and cats as healthy as possible. So people need shelf stable stuff,
Yeah.
that they can keep in their cupboard and just roll with it. And so I like when we can take something that is new concept science and then make it so like someone at the store could very easily be like, oh, cool, this is a whole food probiotic.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like over the last year or so, I've started to hear some pushback on giving probiotics to healthy dogs, for instance. But that's because people are starting to question, like, oh, do I just want to give this one particular strain, or what am I really giving? But I really like this idea of like the whole food based thing, because I do feel good about giving my dogs whole foods that will feed their microbiome or help with their microbiome. So it's very exciting. I feel like any pushback that somebody would have on probiotics, like this is actually a whole food product.
Yeah, and and the cool thing too is every time they grow it out, so they have this culture now at the lab, right? From Bailey's blend, which is gonna, soil, which is gonna have like 500 different cultures in it. So it'll have those same cultures every time, but every time the lab grows them, they're not gonna grow out in the same way. So they'll be in different varying amounts in every bottle. Personally, I thought it was cool that we could get cultures from both Kelly and I.
Yeah, I felt like it was really personal, like a personal product for you guys to be putting out.
Yeah, I mean, I had my raw yogurt culture has been going for like 2.5 years, and I had it this morning for breakfast. And it, I think in order to like, and we try to simplify the message as much as possible, but it is cool to get into like the brass tacks of like, so even if you just take that culture, for example, right? Like, yes, it contains like initial yogurt starter culture, and it contains like 3 different local farms that make raw yogurt to get different culture sets in there. It contains a commercial coconut yogurt, but the real crux of it is it's never been above 100 degrees. And I every time I make it, which is like once a week, sometimes twice a week, I'm inoculating a new round of raw milk with the last batch. And so what you get every time is so if you think about it, every cow or goat that's gone into this, their milk has gone into this, has a different probiotic set because of genetics, because of their diet, because of the time of year, all that thing. So I'm doing that every time and adding more diversity into that culture set. So, I mean, that's every week for over 2 years. And so there's a ton of this like hand selected diversity. And then when you go into soil, nature did that. So that's evolutionary diversity of plants and bacteria in the air and all those things. And so nature kind of usually does a better job of things than I do. So I think, all 3 of these are going to be amazing.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to getting my hands on it. I love it.
So Kimberly, remember we saw that guy at Super Zoo that had the probiotic rich foods?
I was thinking about that when you said, and it's just like one strain. And did we tell you? We told you that we ran away from a booth at Super Zoo last year.
That
Well,
makes sense.
it was a raw food brand that had a probiotic. That was their big thing, is they had the probiotic in their food. And I asked the question if they were concerned about um, a dog's system eventually like negatively reacting to the regular
Mm.
infusion of that one strain. And Erin asked, "Why did you choose this strain?" And yeah, it was
That's a
not
good question.
does not compute, and it was not prepared to ask, not prepared for people like us who were going to ask the questions. And it became immediately uncomfortable, and we
Oh, good.
ran away like the professionals we are.
Well, we have I have Global coming up next week in Orlando, and we actually have made a video that plays at our booth describing the probiotics and whatnot. So for those that we have a small team. There's just 4 of us there, both at Super Zoo and Global. And so if we're talking to someone, you can get the lowdown. We're getting really high tech nowadays. So
Yeah, so my girl Nessie, who has popped up her head from time to time while we're talking, she has been slightly yeasty in her feet ever since we adopted her. She came through the shelter system with all the vaccines and all the spaying and, all the kibble, and God only knows what she ate before then, and it's just been something that we have been trying to get under control since we brought her home. And so I was excited to hear that one of your products, the kombucha-based one, would even be appropriate for a yeasty dog situation. Can you just tell us a little bit about how that would be beneficial for a yeasty dog?
Yeah, there's really there's a couple methods uh, by which you can, in my opinion, get rid of yeast. So one of them, in the sense of the kombucha one, and stems from experience working with a vet. This is where the idea came from, was, working with a vet who was feeding kombucha scobies as a way to get rid of yeast issues, but also just fermented, heavily yeast-rich foods and using those in animals that are dealing with yeast. So the concept there is like in kombucha or in, say, leaf, you're going to have like 190 different species of yeast in that probiotic. And so that's balanced. So anytime you have a yeast issue, it's just a yeast overgrowth of one particular strain. So this is going to inoculate the body with a bunch of good, balanced yeast. And so over time, there's only a certain amount of room for yeast in the body. So that can be extremely helpful. The other thing, that for dogs that are really stubborn yeast issues, and we saw this actually on our feeding trial work like a T, and it's actually in Rita's book as well, is just bearing down to no carbs whatsoever, basically. And our food works for that because we have a dark leafy green, which is basically all fiber, the carbohydrate content. And so we had a dog on our feeding trial who had yeast issues for years, and that actually started to clear up and completely subside. And they had tried a lot of different things. And so I would try one of those two things. But if you're like me, I mean, I have to do other things. It's one of the reasons I couldn't do the feeding trial, because I couldn't just be like, I'm only going to feed beef for 6 months. That's my brain would explode. So I think for those of us that don't want to just pare down and do the long haul on that, this can be a really good way. And then, just keeping that as like a maintenance tool forever, basically.
Yeah. I mean, talk about a perfect example of food as medicine.
Yeah. That's what we always need to start there. Start with food and then go to medicine if we need to. That's kind of my thought on generally everything. So
What exactly is required to do the feeding trials?
like, what do you measure or do?
Yeah, like you said, they like all they can feed
Oh
is
yeah.
just that food for.
So they only ate beef for 6 months. And the nice thing is we actually have the freeze dried food, which could be used as treats because it's exactly the same diet.
Oh,
So
okay.
that helped, I think, ease some of that. And by the way, if anyone who's listening to this, going back to our earlier comments about transparency, we'll send you the full results of our feeding trial, and happy to do that. And by the way, I won't, if somebody reaches out to me, and I'm not saying this is a bad thing, I've never done this. If somebody reaches out to me, I'll just give you whatever information you want. I don't need to know why you're using it, or if you're gonna post it somewhere, great. This is our information that we meant for the public. So like, cool. But so basically they only eat that one food for 6 months. They get a pre-physical, they get a post-physical, they get weighed every week, and then they get blood drawn at the beginning, and then they get blood drawn at the end, and then we actually went above and beyond and did it in the middle as well. So we had kind of 3 different values on that. And then we had Dr. Dina, who's in Illinois, was the lead vet on this, and Barbara Royal was the consultant vet. So she looked over everything and the results. And then Krista Fox was the vet tech on this one as well, and she did most of the dirty work, to be honest. And she really I would just thank her incredibly because she did a lot of the reporting back on the communal kind of spreadsheet that me and her had going on. So she did a lot for us, and that was just because she's a good person who wants to help animals. So it's not like we were paying her to do that. So thank you, Krista. You are the best.
Well, that's what the thing that I love most about, the raw feeding community, especially when I first started feeding raw, you saw all of this. And it was that so many people came into the community because they had a dog, they witnessed something, they love dogs, and so they want to help other people. And I think from that's where I have learned to just trust the brand. I trust the information that they're putting out there. I don't need to ask them to prove it. And it's not to say that people who want people to provide more support are wrong for doing that. It's just I have a different way of looking at it than other people do. So I think the variety of mindsets that are out there, perspectives that are out there, are only served to make things a little bit better. And I think that, on one hand, teaching pet parents that this is something that they can request, this is something that they can ask for, is a good thing for those people who want it. And also encouraging brands to be more forthcoming of this information because there are people who would want it and that it would help. I mean, I don't think how it could be bad. I mean, I think it's,
Yeah.
it's just a good thing. And, and ultimately it's like, I truly don't think that because a brand doesn't provide me with certain information that they lack transparency. I don't know what's going on their end of the email. So if it's something that's important to me, then I just move on to the next brand. I don't
Mhm.
have a problem with that. And I think that my only concern with the entire discussion is being so quick to label a brand is not being transparent without understanding why they're not producing the information. Also, since I make my own dog food, I kind of feel like I have to be careful about spitting my opinion out into a space of people who are only feeding commercial raw because I'm good. I treat commercial raw as something that I feed when I forgot to thaw out something or I forgot to place an order or because I just, I'm on vacation and I want something easier for Johan. So it's not since I
It's
feed
always got
so
to be easier for the husband.
yeah, since it's so much I have so much variety in my dog's diet that I don't depend on one brand that I feel like, yeah, they're good. We're good.
Well, I think the world would be a better place if people just did their own thing and then that was good enough.
Yeah.
You know, because we're all going to do what makes us comfortable and we're all going to do what works. And I've been through the whole gambit of all the different diet styles and being a consumer and, before doing this. And so I get all the different perspectives and it's just easier if I say this a lot, but when it comes to any interaction, if somebody comes to you and they say like, "Oh, I'm so excited. I want to add, fresh foods. I started adding sweet potato, or something like that." If your response isn't like, "That's so cool. I'm sure that your dog loves that and that's such a great start. I'd love to help you if you want some more suggestions, but I think that's really great." If it's anything but that, then maybe just I don't say anything, because
Amen.
you're gonna dissuade them from doing that. And that's our favorite customer at Green Juju is the person who just does one thing. Like they have never done anything, just does one thing, just adds our veggie blends, whatever it might be, and now their dog is going to be exponentially healthier because of it.
Well, Billy, thank you for your time today.
Absolutely. I really enjoy being here. I don't like your guys' personalities that much, but the show is great.